yes, baby, I can hold it.
Welcome to another episode of Mosaic Station. Um, we have our Mosaic staff joining us today to chat a little bit about what's going on in the world right now. Hi, my name is Chris. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the director of the Mosaic Cross Cultural Center.
Hi, I'm Sharon. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the program coordinator for Mosaic Cross Cultural Center.
Hi, I'm Carl. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the programmer for APITA Task Force.
I'm Kenny. I use they, them pronouns. I am a cultural programmer for the Mosaic Cross Cultural Center.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. We kind of wanted to. I kind of wanted to record a little bit. The thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about has been, we've had an increase in anti-Asian racism, xenophobia, and acts of violence recently, which is not the first time this has happened. When shelter in place first started back. Shelter in place started almost a year ago, but towards the beginning of shelter in place, I remember significantly, maybe May-ish, there was also an increase in anti-Asian racism, xenophobia in the United States, I wanted to talk about this a little bit. One, because it's happening again, but two, because we are here in the San Jose Bay Area, and it's we have stories that are coming up in the Bay Area of it happening as well. So whether it's San Francisco or East Bay, there are stories of things happening right in where we are. So I kind of just wanted to get some perspective from folks about how they're feeling about it, what they think about it. I think, for me specifically, one of the things I worry about is that, I have parents who live in San Jose who are older Chinese folks who are both retired, and they, theoretically could be targets of violence. And I think about that, and I don't live with them, and I don't run their chores for them or anything. Mostly because they don't let me. I've asked a lot, they don't really let me. But that means that they go out and do their own shopping and stuff. So that's one of the things that I've been thinking about too.
Thank you, Chris, for kind of sharing. I think it's when the pandemic started, right, and the former administration and 45, the rhetoric around immigrants and Asians was so prominent, and I think it was in the news, and there were conversations around how do we address some of the anti-immigrant, anti-Asian rhetoric happening in the US. And then it kind of just, life happened, right? People were just trying to survive. And now I think there's been it's not a reemergence, because obviously it's been happening throughout this whole time and within the history of the US. But I think the incidences that Chris is talking about have been kind of happening back to back, and so it's making the news. It's on people's minds, and as a person who has been kind of taking this news in, I'm sitting there and I'm there's this fear of what is happening, a little bit of logically, why are elders being targeted, and I'm trying to make sense of it. And so I would love to kind of hear from Pearl and Kenny, what are some thoughts, right, as folks who are living in kind of a hub, right, of interacting with Asian elders, right? And then also, as students who, our campus is an open campus, and we see, uh, you know, um, API elders kind of using our campus and meditating or working around. And now, there is this sense of like Chris was saying, like getting chores done or to-do lists, right? And they're out in the city. How are you all kind of taking the news and seeing the interactions?
So I have I feel like a lot of people have a really soft spot for our elderly. And I don't know if anybody remembers this story. It honestly was not in the news as much as it should be, but it was in Tracy. And like an elderly sick man, he just got stabbed and it was on camera. Like they showed you getting, like it was very triggering. I don't like, if anybody wants to see it, they can look it up. But like there's a video of it and you see him like fall to the ground, and there was no charges, like nothing ended up happening from it. That wasn't too long ago. So when I think of like, elderly people being attacked over something like that, like obviously your heart's gonna really hurt, especially because they're so weak and defenseless. So it is weird when it's targeted like racially to like APITA communities. It is a really weird feeling because I'm sure we all have elderly folks who like to take their walks. They like to go walk around. Like we bring our grandparents to like the park so they can walk around and everything. So it's definitely an unsettling feeling for sure.
I had seen a lot of like news circulating around recently about stuff, and I'm still kind of like trying to figure out like what's going on. But even like at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of like anti-Asian like language, especially anti-Chinese language going around. Like when I remember I went to the urgent care and they were like questioning me, like, oh, have you talked to somebody like that was in China or from China or like stuff like that? And I'm like, what the heck? Like, why is that even a question right now? Even like before I left, like in last March, I remember I was taking the bus to a friend's house, and it was the bus right in front of the Asian supermarket in downtown, and these two people came up to me. They're Black people, and they were like talking about the virus, and they were like kind of like they were just like kind of like very, really racist. And I don't know if the word is racist, like prejudiced about it, and like kind of like pointing at the shop and like making like some type of connection. And I was just kind of really uncomfortable, and I didn't really know what to say. Um, and I was just like, yeah, it was really weird. And like, how can you? They're in there, like this is their shop, like this is where like, and like especially like elderly people, they're going to the shop to like buy food, and like even then like they have people like kind of jeopardizing their safety just by like using type of language that like, or like putting blame on things that like don't have to be put blame on, like, and especially now like America has like is like the worst place to be in right now for this fucking pandemic, and you still want to blame other people. I feel like a lot of Americans, um, and like a non-Asian Americans like to like place blame somewhere else, and like no, it's our fault. It just as much as anybody's fault, and like I don't know, just like take accountability. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. I think when I think about the like you were saying, Kenny, about like like what it means that this violence is happening, it's like part of it is like misplaced frustration and anger, and it's like people I can't imagine. I mean, maybe people do, but I can't imagine anybody reasonably thinks that like, oh, this individual like caused me to get sick. You know what I mean? Like these people aren't involved, with like transmitting diseases or anything. It's just like see an Asian person, heard an Asian person, and it's like that's the kind of like senseless racial violence that like we're talking about, and like I think it's difficult sometimes, especially as an PETA like community member to like think that like you know that growing up as the kid of immigrants, assimilation was always a big deal in my community, right? And it's like you know like being able to speak English without a Chinese accent was like a big deal for my family, and like being able to like talk to people over the phone or like answer the door or whatever, or like fill out forms without like with like English as a natural language, right? Where it doesn't seem like it's your second or third or fourth language, was like a big deal for my family. And so like you know it's interesting to think that like they spent all this effort and time for me to like quote unquote assimilate, right? And yet like at the end of the day, um I will always be a foreigner to people in this country, right? Like I was born in California, I grew up in California, I went to all of my schooling in California, I was an English lit major in undergrad, and yet you know I'm always going to be seen as a foreigner in this country, you know.
No matter how hard like people like us, like we try to assimilate, like at the end of the day, like who we are and like what we look like is always just gonna be that barrier. Like there's always gonna be like that thing, you know?
Mhm.
And, you know, it's it sucks. Like it's horrible. Like I think that's so it's horrible. I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, I am an immigrant, right? Like I immigrated when I was 8 years old, and there was there is a privilege in immigrating when you're young, because I feel like I was more able to kind of uh, you know take on the culture and assimilate it to a degree. But I remember a couple of years ago, there was an elderly like South Asian man walking in Texas and didn't speak the language, and he was visiting, and cops pulled him over asking for identification, and they it's a very violent and brutal video to watch, and they like slammed him to the ground, like breaking one of his uh, vertebrae in his spine, and he was paralyzed. And after that, I have my grandparents visiting me, and I was like, you can't walk. And this was broad daylight in like a suburban neighborhood. And it was like the fear that I have for my elders, right, as an immigrant and as like being here, like it never goes away. Like it's like, even I think like I hear what Chris is saying, in that like, you're always gonna be seen as an outsider, even though you were born here and like this is your home, right? And this is my home too. But I feel like there's this extra layer of like, I'm not an elder, but like I see these things in the news and I feel it. And I just have like a lot of fear around my own family and my own safety, right? Like my mom still has a slight accent, right? So does my dad. And um, the way that we, I think growing up, like my parents, um, encouraged me to speak English at home, and they spoke English, right? I was able to retain Hindi, but like with my siblings, like they were born here, they barely know the language. And I think it is that like, how do we pass, right? And like we can't, because our skin color is way too brown, right? But if we can be safe, right? And I think our sense of safety like is so at the forefront. But with our elders, right, especially when they're visiting or they're like live here, like there's an extra layer of that identity, and it is very like it's very hypocritical, right? As Kenny was saying, right? Like Americans need to get their shit together, because we really tote this like melting pot ideology, and yet at the end of the day, it's bullshit when we see these things in the news and these incidents continue to happen in 2021.
Yeah, that melting pot shit, like it's just like I realize like it's not really about like celebrating the differences. It's just like we're all just the same, but we look different. I'm like, no, we're not the same. We're gonna act different and we're gonna think different things. And that's okay. People
Yeah, it's the melting pot myth is like very unidirectional, right? It only goes in one way. It's like we want foreigners to act more like Americans, but like you never see, like for example in the media, you never see anybody like become more American by like quote unquote more American. I realize I just did that for the camera. This is an audio podcast. You never see anyone becoming quote unquote more American by like learning how to use chopsticks or like eating sushi. You know, like it doesn't go in that direction, right? You only see people become quote unquote more American by like eating burgers or like having barbecues or shit like that. So it's like this idea of like America is a melting pot. It's like no, it's like America is a place where everybody learns how to be white. Like that's what it is, you know.
And even the barbecue and the burgers, that originates from somewhere else, right? So like even then, like it doesn't like make sense to me that like that the food and the languages, right? Like there's so many. In the last 4 years, there's been a huge number of viral videos that have gone where racist folks are telling people in other communities to speak American, right? Or like to like speak English. Like if you really want to speak Spanish so badly, you should go back, right? And it's like, what are you saying? Like I was born here. You want me to go back? Like go home? Like what does that mean? And I think like to Chris's point, right? Like there that doesn't even, that identity is just so much more complex, and I don't think there is one way to be American.
in America, being an immigrant or being from like a foreign place is only like celebrated when you're from Europe. And like you know like in school like you're like oh like the pilgrims this shit and that shit and like Ellis Island and immigration is so beautiful, we all came together. But then when it's someone from like South America or Asia or Africa, it's like, oh wait, I'm like, what? I thought y'all were so happy about the melting pot. Y'all are so happy about the different cultures and shit. Like, what's the truth? We know the truth.
Yeah, and another thing, like I remember all the vandalism of like Asian specific businesses. I feel like that was so unnecessary, and there was so much in San Jose. Like San Jose is one of the most Asian cities in the country. Like, wow,
Yeah,
it's right
yeah.
here.
Thank you for bringing that up. I like totally forgot. And there was even like a Bay Area campaign on social media saying like support your local like Asian restaurants, because there was such a huge decline that we didn't that like businesses, like specifically Asian businesses, were going out of business because of that.
Yeah, I remember like hell, like I would go to. There was a fuzz spot down in downtown that I would always go to, and I would always go like always reliable, always there. The people were dope, and I think it's family owned. I'm not sure. Even like hoe bags, like family owned, like Asian family owned. Like I felt like I don't know where I was, but like there was like signage and like trying to like kind of like not scare people away from like the business. And I'm like, that's fucked up. Like you have to worry about racist people like not coming and supporting your business, even though just a couple months ago everybody was cool. Like
Mm-hmm,
I don't know.
For those of y'all listening, Hobags is House of Bagels.
Sorry, y'all.
If you
and
know,
also-
you know.
And
Period.
that right there is also Jasmine joining us. Jasmine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Jazz. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the social media coordinator for Mosaic. And yeah, I got some spaghetti with me.
Nice. Yeah. I think it's interesting. Thank you for bringing up the violence against the businesses, because like I think about the fact that like for some reason these businesses are still seen as like foreign businesses that are targetable, but we only have one economy. Like these are businesses where like people like spend money and buy things, ostensibly I guess buy things, and then like they employ people, they pay taxes, like they buy things from supply chain so that they can give consumers, like they're part of the one economy that we have in the United States. So I don't see why, like, again, we're talking about this like senseless racial violence, right? It makes no sense that you would isolate a business and be like, you're a terrible business. It's like that business is part of this grand thing that we call the economy, like, so
Well,
it's yeah.
So and I'm not a business major, Pearl is, but I'm not a business major. But is there then a, just like Kenny was talking about earlier, there's like an othering that happens, right? When we see like stores or whatever, and you can like point and say that's an Asian store, like, is that what happens? Like, is there still that thing of like, you are, even if it's like a burger joint or like House of Bagels is a bagel like place, but like you see it as like an Asian place, right? Even if it's like had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, that was a good point. I do see Hobarts as an Asian-owned business. I always have. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It is American, but I see it as an Asian-owned business.
And I think that's where like the perspective that we have, right? And like that's why I think when we see these news stories or whatever, or like actual incidences of violence happening against Asians, right? I think there is this like, it speaks to this long history of like how we have made communities where this is where the Chinese folks go, this is where the Japanese folks, this is like Koreatown, this is whatever, right? Like we still have remnants of that. And I think communities, right, have been like, okay, this is our space, right? So like Chinatowns have historically, right, been like the space where Asian folks can go and feel safe. They can speak their language, they can have their food, they can have their businesses. But then it almost feels like, well, that's where you're supposed to be. And that's your like safe haven within, like there's like a reclaiming, right, of that space. But then some of the recent incidences have happened in San Francisco near Chinatown or in Chinatown, right? So then it's like, well, shit, where are we safe? Why? And so I think I that's also very like it feels there's like an extra layer of like nowhere is safe. And like I know that, but then it's just like it feels even more like gross to think about that.
Yeah, and I feel like almost a certain anger like towards these incidents because you're attacking somebody is vulnerable, or like you're attacking a business when nobody's there. Like I feel like that's such like a coward move. It really upsets you. Like what kind of person attacks an elderly, no matter what they are? Like I don't know. That really bothers me.
If you're doing that, like, you're like pathetic, low key. Like, really, you have to attack an elderly person to prove what kind of point? What does that prove?
Yeah, I mean, and recognizing too that that is the history of white instigated racial violence in the United States, right? Like it has always been an act of cowardice because white violence in the United States, like white initiated violence in the United States racially, has never been about having a fair fight. Like the Ku Klux Klan did not come to attack people one on one, right? Like they did not, they came like after people's families, they came after children, they came after unarmed people, they came after people who couldn't fight back, and they came in mobs. They came in the tens and the 20s and the hundreds in order to enact racial violence in the United States. So like this is part of the history of white initiated racial violence in the United States. It's always been about fighting unfairly. Um, and that's the fact is that is the history of the United States. It's like you can't get around that. Um, and it continues to this day. Like when we talk about this like kind of racial violence in the United States, it's not just like physical violence, but it's also like how policies are enacted and how laws are enacted and how unfair the system is towards anybody who isn't white. Like it's always been like that. So like it's just another example of how like this violence is always like it is always an act of cowardice. Like
Do y'all think that maybe the targeting of elderly people is due to like their closeness to the heritage? Because like Sharon said, when people like immigrate, they move over, like they want their kids to like assimilate and like kind of like fit into the new world they're in, but like the people like the elderly like more likely like they're kind of have still that connection to like their homeland or their culture, and like maybe that's like threatening to people.
I think that could be the thing. Like not only are they easy to attack, but also because they resemble us. I sometimes I feel like maybe we look more Americanized, and the older generations don't. Like for the example in Tracy, like obviously there are a lot of people that wear a turban, but this was an elderly sick man in a pretty dominant Punjabi Sikh city. Like Tracy is.
Mm.
So I feel like that was a direct target. That was not a robbery, that was a stabbing. So I think sometimes that really can be the case.
It's hard for me because I don't understand the like I am going to go out and stab a person today because of this reason. Like my mind doesn't work that way, so it's hard for me to understand, right? But I wanted to like uh when Chris was talking about like how the structures and the policy, right? Like how they kind of work in the current system. I was seeing so Jazz, our social media person coordinator, posted about some of the violence on our Instagram, and I kind of went through a rabbit hole as one does on Instagram, and I was seeing someone in the comments said, this is someone else's post, said, we need to include Asian racism in trainings. And I sat there and I was like, do we not currently talk about Asian racism in like trainings, like anti-bias trainings or stereotype? And I sat there and I was like, oh, I guess like in policy wise, right? If you were to go through a training, like I don't think there are explicit trainings around that, and like maybe that needs to be change policy wise in the workplace or whatever. There needs to be more of this conversation happening, just as much as we talk about anti-blackness and the racism that Latinx folks are facing here in America. I think that should be added as well.
yeah, I would say just on a very surface level. um and this is not about playing oppression Olympics, so I don't want to say that this is like we should or shouldn't compared to the way we treat other folks. I just want to focus specifically on APITA identities. Like on a very surface level, like I don't see a large scale call to, like, for example, like understand how to pronounce Asian names, right? So like, I think a lot of APITA folks will say that in their lifetime, at least in the early part of their lifetime, they did not have a lot of teachers from the P through 20 experience who knew how to pronounce their name. And as a result, sometime in the like kind of third grade, second grade, third grade point, they just adopted some sort of like English nickname, right? Like, and that just became standard, right? And I think that, like, when we talk about like, is it normal to think about Asian identities as like something that needs to be talked about in like an anti-bias training or whatever, like on a very surface level, it's like, well, yeah, like I don't see like a massive cultural revolution of being like, hey, learn how to freaking pronounce like names, like um so on that level, on a very surface basic level, it's like, yeah, like could systemic bias trainings include a section on like how to properly pronounce Asian names? It's like, yeah, they could. Like that would be very helpful. Like, you know.
Yeah, the first time I had a professor say my name right, or the first time I had a teacher say my name right for the first time, like in my whole life, like just like the first day of class, she was an Indian professor, and I was like, wow, like I never thought in like my 21 years that I would have a professor that could say my name right. So that was cool.
Honestly, it's like it's like people just being lazy. Like, I mean, I can't speak from like an Asian perspective, but like even like black names, like they just kind of like think like, okay, like yeah, that's it. Like there was a girl in my high school, her name was Kasaya, but like people were just like Keisha, and she was like, no, that's not my name. Like I don't know why you think that's just easier to say, but like that's not my name. And like she would have to correct people every day, and I'm like, is it you don't understand, or are you just like you just don't care, you don't give a fuck? Like, and that's really what it is. Like you can easily like figure out how to say a name or just like learn like, okay, like in this type of language, this is how this letter is pronounced, so put them together and then there you go.
Yeah, if you know how to pronounce like Worcestershire sauce, then you can learn how to pronounce names. You just have to care. Like you just have to show that respect to other cultures.
If you can spell and pronounce Tchaikovsky and all that shit, I don't
Yeah,
want to hear
Schwarzenegger.
nothing. For real, what?
Yeah, we all got Schwarzenegger down.
So I guess, as this news is unfolding and we're clearly all very like much processing, right? What are some ways that I think maybe we ourselves can spread awareness or get involved? And what can we do as like a, SJSU? What would you like to see, I guess?
I guess like my number one concern would just be keeping the elderly safe. Because I remember when my grandpa was here, like he would like I know APITA communities really like their walks. Like they really be walking. Like my grandpa used to walk all the time for like 2 hours a day. And to be honest, sometimes we would get worried about him because he would be gone for so long. Like, oh, what if something happened? He's not gonna know who to talk to. Like really anything could happen to him. So something to keep elderly safe and keep them moving still because that's important for them.
Yeah, my grandma is also she loves going on walks. She tries to at least, every day in the morning. And I live in a city that, I'm not really as concerned for her safety. So I'm glad, like I have that security when it comes to her. But, of course I'm still like I'd still be worried if like she didn't come back for a long time or whatever. And yeah, I mean there are still definitely like anti Asian sentiments. I mean, we have like Trump supporters in this neighborhood too, so it's like, anything could happen. But yeah, with all of these cases coming up, I would just want people to watch out for each other, people to stay in community with each other and not let it divide us, because there is also, a lot of like anti-Black sentiments coming out of this, when really like we need to focus on just supporting each other and looking out for the elderly, because they are in a vulnerable position, especially if they're alone and just enjoying a walk or something. So yeah, just look out for each other and stay in community and don't let this divide us.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you saying that, Jazz, because I think it's important to remember that like this is not about comparing races. This is not about trying to say because somebody said something or somebody did something, everybody needs to like owe each other or anything. This is not about like people like needing to do whatever. It's about like there's an issue happening and we as a community just need to like try our best to address it, you know? And it's like, you know, and we need to give grace to people who like I think it's important to give grace to people to like allow them to take on issues with the capacity that they have. Like we are still in the midst of a global pandemic, you know, we're still in the midst of like police brutality, we're still in the midst of like, you know, like people being killed by the police, we're still in the midst of people like police officers being tried for their acts of violence. We are still in the midst of you know, all these things, so it's like we have to appreciate the fact that like there's still a lot of stuff going on, and that, you know, we need to focus on what we can focus on. So um this is not the time to be saying like, oh, like you need to do this or we need to do this or whatever, in terms of like people like, I don't know, having social media campaigns or whatever. Rather, I would encourage folks, put your energy in the causes that like affect you. Put your energy in what like you can, and like don't put energy in forcing other people to expend their energy. Like focus on the things that you can focus on, right? So yeah, in that vein, I would say like echoing the sentiments that Jazz and Paul said, like, yeah, like try like definitely like keeping like you know, my focus, you know, I want to keep my parents safe, I want to keep my family safe as much as possible. So like, you know, at the same time that I'm trying to register them for vaccine shots, I'm also telling them like, stay in this geographical bounds when you go on walks, you know, don't go downtown or whatever. Like, you know, it's like there's a reality of like trying to protect them and stuff. So yeah, so definitely wanting to do that, and then, you know, just general awareness, like know what's going on, you know, I would advocate for that. And then when it comes time to fight the fight with institutions and systems change, like um, know how we can be better institutions for one another, right? Like I think all of our institutions have a lot of work that we can do to try to be more aware of different issues that happen and ways in which we can better support our different populations, and advocate for those changes when the time comes to advocate for those changes.
Well, thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and engaging in this conversation. Thank you, Chris, for bringing this up and, you know, getting us talking about this, because it's really important. And, you know, yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to still happen from all of us. So thank you everyone for listening. You know, as questions may come up, please feel free to reach out to us at mosaic@sjsu.edu. Also, CAPS is a wonderful resource as you're listening, or as you're doing your research and you're feeling any type of way, right? It's a great way um, to find support. And yeah, they have appointments available. You just have to make it, you know, ahead of time. So please reach out to CAPS as well if you need support. All right. Thanks, everyone.